It had been an ordinary morning, one of those early spring days that seemed to stretch forever, the sun rising lazily over the Egyptian desert. Dr. Nadia Al-Mansour, an archaeologist known for her expertise in ancient Egyptian tombs, stood with a team of experts just outside a newly discovered tomb in the Valley of the Kings. This tomb was unlike any other, one that had been lost to time, sealed for 3,500 years. The discovery had been a stroke of luck, a fortunate accident. While conducting excavation work on an unrelated site, a team member noticed the faint outline of an opening beneath the sand, a hidden doorway. At first, no one believed it. The tomb had been marked off on maps long ago, thought to be just another empty burial site. But as they dug deeper, they realized this was different. "This is it," Dr. Nadia said, her voice barely above a whisper as the heavy ancient doors of the tomb creaked open. The weight of history was upon them. There was a sense of reverence in the air. The unknown had been sealed away for millennia, and now they were about to be the first to enter. The moment the tomb was fully opened, the scent of musty air, stagnant for thousands of years, rushed out, thick and oppressive. It hit their senses with an almost physical force, a mixture of decay, ancient oils, and the dust of ages. The team stood frozen for a moment, unsure whether to step inside. This wasn't just any tomb. This was a royal burial. The air was thick with mystery. They had unearthed something that could change the course of history. Secrets buried for 3,500 years. "Are you ready?" Dr. Nadia asked, turning to her team. Her voice, though steady, carried a slight tremor. She had always dreamed of this moment, of standing in front of an undiscovered tomb, one untouched by time, one that could hold answers to the world's most ancient questions. The other members of her team nodded, their faces a mixture of excitement and trepidation. With a deep breath, Nadia stepped forward, the first to cross the threshold. The others followed closely behind. The tomb was remarkably well preserved, considering its age. Carvings on the walls still shimmered with faint gold leaf, and faint traces of vibrant murals decorated the inner walls. The air inside was dry, but the temperature was surprisingly cool, an anomaly in the desert heat. As the team moved deeper, they finally came upon the sarcophagus. It was massive, covered in intricate carvings and layers of gold. The centerpiece was an image of an ancient ruler, his face forever frozen in stone, a symbol of power and divine rule. But something felt wrong. Nadia knelt before the sarcophagus, examining it closely. Her fingers brushed the stone, tracing the edges of the carvings. She could feel the weight of it, the tomb, the secret it held. There was something else in the air, something beyond just the excitement of discovery. A feeling of unease settled over her, but she pushed it aside. "This is amazing," she murmured, but her voice was tinged with doubt. She was an expert. She had studied countless tombs before. This one, though, it was different. She could feel it deep in her bones. Dr. Nadia took another step closer to the sarcophagus. It was sealed, but only by ancient oils and bindings. The team had prepared for this. They had the tools to unseal it carefully, preserving whatever lay inside. The moment the seal was broken, a strange sound filled the room, like the creak of something ancient, something that hadn't moved in centuries. The room suddenly felt much smaller, the air heavier, as if the tomb itself was watching them, waiting for something. Nadia's heart began to race as she realized that they had just crossed into unexplored territory, and that whatever was inside could very well change everything. The moment the ancient seal broke, an eerie silence filled the tomb. The once cold air now felt as though it had come to life, heavier, like it was clinging to them, almost as if the tomb itself was alive, waiting. The golden sarcophagus, so intricately carved and unbothered by the passage of time, lay before them, its mysterious contents waiting to be revealed. Dr. Nadia and her team stood in the stunned silence, almost afraid to move. The ancient oils they had just disturbed smelled overwhelmingly foul, but there was something else now, a strange undercurrent to the scent. It was faint, but undeniable, like something sickly, like the smell of rot mixed with burning incense. Nadia cleared her throat, trying to shake the feeling that something was wrong. "We're here. This is it," she said softly to herself as much as to the team. She stepped forward, carefully placing her hand on the edge of the sarcophagus lid. With a deep breath, she nodded to one of her assistants, Dr. Rajiv, signaling him to help her. Together, they gently lifted the lid, the creaking sound that followed seeming far louder than it should have been. The first thing that struck them was the air. A sudden, suffocating wave of ancient, stale breath rushed out from the sarcophagus. It made Megan, one of the junior archaeologists, cough violently. She tried to wipe her hand across her face, but the strange odor lingered, thick, cloying. And then they saw it. The body inside, a mummy, was incredible in its preservation. The skin, though darkened with age, still retained an almost waxy appearance, and the linen wrappings were so tightly wound that they seemed perfectly intact. The golden jewelry adorning the mummy sparkled faintly, though it was now dulled by centuries of dust and decay. But it wasn't the physical preservation that unsettled them. It was the eyes. The eyes of the mummy, though covered in layers of ancient fabric, seemed to have an unnatural glow, like they were not fully closed. They were open, just slightly, but enough to give the appearance that they were watching them, staring back at them. Nadia's heart skipped a beat. She felt a sudden chill run down her spine, and a cold sweat began to form on her brow. Her fingers trembled as she brushed the edge of the mummy's wrappings, her eyes glued to those open eyes, trying to comprehend what she was seeing. "What's going on?" Rajiv whispered, his voice hoarse with disbelief. He too had noticed the unsettling eyes. Nadia tried to force herself to focus, to tell herself that it was simply a trick of the light or a figment of her imagination. She had dealt with mummies before, nothing this disturbing, but these eyes, they seemed too real, too alive. It must be some form of preservative or embalming technique we don't understand yet, Nadia said, her voice shaky but determined. The eyes might have been intentionally left exposed for some reason, but something felt off. It was as though the room had become thicker, the air heavier and colder. The shadows around the tombs seemed to stretch unnaturally, as if they were reaching for them. The ancient symbols etched into the walls pulsed with a faint, almost imperceptible glow. "We should be careful," Rajiv added, still eyeing the mummy. "There are rumors about certain tombs being cursed, being protected by ancient magic. Maybe this one—" His voice trailed off as Nadia turned to him, cutting him off with a sharp glance. "I know, Rajiv, but this is science. We're here to understand, not to fear." She forced herself to step closer, reaching toward the mummy's wrappings. Her fingers brushed against the fabric as she carefully peeled it back, trying to reveal more of the face. But as her hand reached out, she felt the temperature drop drastically, the cold seeping into her bones. Then the ground trembled beneath their feet. It was subtle at first, but then it became undeniable. The tremors were more than just a natural shift in the earth. They were something more, something unnatural. The sound of scraping stone began to rise from somewhere deep within the tomb, followed by an unsettling low growl, like something ancient, buried beneath the earth, was awakening. "What was that?" Megan asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Rajiv looked around, his eyes wide with fear. "I don't know." The room suddenly seemed alive, as though the walls, the ground, and the very air around them were reacting to their intrusion. Nadia felt it now, a palpable sense of being watched. And it wasn't just the mummy's unsettling eyes that caused her to feel this way. It was as if something deep in the tomb had stirred, and it wasn't ready to be uncovered. With trembling hands, Nadia slowly closed the lid of the sarcophagus, her mind racing. "We need to leave, now!" As the lid settled into place, the tremors in the earth seemed to stop. The eerie sound that had been building quieted, but the unease didn't lift. The tomb was silent, but the air felt wrong, too still. Nadia and her team stood frozen, the oppressive silence pressing down on them. Their eyes were wide, faces pale. Something had changed. They had disturbed something deep and ancient, and whatever had been sealed away was not ready to stay hidden any longer. The silence in the tomb was deafening, yet the air felt charged, unnaturally heavy, as though the very stones around them were holding their breath. Megan wiped her brow, her pulse still racing, unable to shake the feeling that something was watching them, hidden just beyond the veil of the tomb. The oppressive cold that had followed the tremors now lingered, as though the air itself had turned stale. Dr. Nadia, still standing at the sarcophagus, glanced at her team. She could see their anxiety reflected in their faces. Their wide eyes and taut expressions told her that they too felt the strange unease. But there was no turning back now. They had uncovered something that had been locked away for thousands of years, and she wasn't about to leave without understanding what they had found. "We should go," Rajiv said again, his voice shaky. "We've disturbed something. This place, it's not meant for us." Nadia hesitated, but she didn't respond right away. Her mind raced with questions. Why was this tomb sealed so carefully? What had they unleashed by opening it? The golden sarcophagus, with its dark, glowing eyes, weighed heavily on her thoughts. It wasn't just an ordinary tomb. "Let's finish documenting everything. We need to be thorough," Nadia said, her voice firm but carrying a hint of doubt she couldn't mask. She couldn't let this moment slip away without uncovering as much as possible. Reluctantly, the team began to gather their equipment, but as they moved about the tomb, a soft whistling sound broke through the heavy air, barely perceptible at first but growing louder. It seemed to come from deep within the walls of the tomb, as though the ancient stones themselves were whispering. "What is that?" Megan asked, her voice trembling. Her eyes darted nervously around the chamber, but there was no clear source. Nadia turned sharply, her instincts on high alert. The air felt like it had thickened again, pressing on her chest as if something was waiting, something ancient and eager to reclaim what had been taken. Before she could respond, the wall nearest the sarcophagus began to tremble. The sound of grinding stone echoed through the tomb, and Nadia's heart skipped a beat. The stone wall, once solid and untouched for millennia, shifted. It was moving. The entire team froze, a wave of panic flooding through them. "Is it another trap?" Rajiv whispered, stepping backward as if trying to distance himself from whatever was happening. Nadia, though startled, forced herself to step forward. "Stay calm. We're scientists. We'll figure this out." But her voice faltered, and even she wasn't sure she believed the words. Then the wall split open, revealing a dark passageway that had been hidden within the tomb. Until now, the darkness beyond the passage was impenetrable, like the mouth of a deep, endless cave. Nadia couldn't breathe. This was not a natural cave. The smooth edges of the opening suggested it had been purposefully carved, designed to be hidden until it was time to reveal itself. The entire room seemed to hum with an energy that made the air feel electric. Nadia felt a pull, an instinct to go forward. She wasn't sure if it was curiosity or something more primal, something that told her she was meant to uncover what lay beyond. "We need to explore it," Nadia whispered to herself, even though she wasn't sure if she was trying to convince herself or the others. But before she could act, she noticed Megan standing still, staring at the opening in horror. "Nadia, I don't think we should go in there," Megan said, her voice shaking. "There's something wrong." But Nadia, overcome by the sheer magnitude of the discovery, couldn't resist. Her fingers trembled as she held the flashlight, shining it into the dark passage. "We don't know what's inside. This could be another chamber, another part of the tomb we've missed. We have to look." With a reluctant sigh, Rajiv stepped closer, a look of hesitation on his face. "Okay, but we're sticking together. No one goes off alone." They gathered their courage, and as one, they stepped into the passageway. The air inside was colder, unnervingly cold, and it felt damp, as if the tomb itself had been sealed away from the outside world for a reason. They walked cautiously, their footsteps echoing through the narrow stone corridor. The walls seemed to close in on them, and the deeper they went, the more the temperature dropped. It felt wrong, like the air itself was rejecting their presence. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the end of the tunnel. And there, standing in the dark, was another door, larger than the last, intricately carved with symbols that none of them recognized. The symbols twisted in strange, unnatural ways, and Nadia could feel the pull of the doorway. It felt ancient, as if it was meant to be opened only by the right person. And perhaps she was that person. "What is that?" Rajiv asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know," Nadia replied, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on her. The door was something otherworldly. It wasn't just a part of the tomb. It felt like a part of something far more ancient, something dangerous. And with that realization, Nadia knew that they had uncovered something more than just a tomb. They had opened a gateway. The door before them loomed like a dark sentinel, its intricate carvings and symbols glowing faintly in the dim light of their flashlights. The deeper they stared at it, the more it seemed to pulse with a sinister energy. The cold in the passageway had become unbearable, and every breath Megan took felt like it was cutting into her lungs. She wanted to turn back, to flee, but her feet felt like they were rooted to the ground. Nadia, her eyes wide with anticipation and fear, stepped forward. Her hand hovered just inches from the door, but she hesitated. Something was wrong. It wasn't the tomb itself. It wasn't the ancient symbols. They were used to that. But the door, it felt alive, as though the walls were closing in, holding their breath for the moment the door would be opened. Should we? Rajiv asked nervously, his voice echoing in the cold air. His hands were trembling, his grip tight on the flashlight. This is beyond anything we've seen. Nadia turned to him, her face pale yet determined. We have to know what's inside, Rajiv. This could change everything we know about ancient Egypt. Her voice trembled, but the curiosity, the need to know, overpowered her fear. The team exchanged nervous glances, each of them knowing that the decision had been made. The tomb, the mummy, the dark passageway. They couldn't turn back now. There was too much at stake, too many secrets to uncover. With a deep breath, Nadia placed her hand on the door, and it felt like the moment everything shifted. The stone beneath her palm was unnaturally cold, as if it had been waiting for this touch, waiting for someone to break the seal. The door groaned, the sound echoing through the corridor as the ancient stone slowly began to shift. Megan, standing at the back, felt a rush of wind. Unnatural, cold, like something was breathing on the other side. It's opening! Kevin, the youngest member of the team, whispered, his voice laced with awe and terror. The door inched forward, revealing what lay beyond. A narrow chamber appeared, its walls lined with dark weathered stone. Strange symbols adorned the walls, etched into the surface like the remnants of a forgotten language. The faint glow of a distant light flickered within the chamber, casting long shadows across the room. The air felt thick, like it was pressing down on them, and the temperature dropped even further as they stepped inside. It was unnervingly cold, almost freezing, and the faint odor of decay mingled with the scent of old, stagnant air. Nadia stepped inside first, the others trailing behind her. As their flashlights illuminated the interior of the room, they saw something unbelievable. The walls were lined with stone sarcophagi, each one engraved with markings that seemed to shift as they passed by them. It was as though the walls were alive, the symbols glowing faintly, pulsing with a dark energy. But it wasn't just the sarcophagi that caught their attention. At the center of the room there was an altar, a stone table, ancient and weathered, covered in dust and cobwebs. On it lay a small, delicate object, its shape unmistakable, even in the dim light. A golden mask, intricately carved, with deep eyes that seemed to stare at them. Nadia moved forward, her heart pounding in her chest. "This is it," she whispered, almost in disbelief. The mask was beautiful, yet disturbing in its design, an ancient relic, the likes of which had never been seen before. She reached out, her fingers trembling as she touched the mask. But the moment her hand made contact, the air shifted. The temperature dropped even more sharply, and the shadows in the room seemed to grow darker, twisting as if they were alive. "Nadia, don't!" Rajiv shouted, but it was too late. The moment the mask touched her hand, a violent tremor shook the ground beneath them. The stone altar cracked, and a deep guttural sound reverberated from deep within the tomb, like the roar of a beast waking from centuries of slumber. Suddenly, the walls began to move. The stones rumbled, and the chamber seemed to shift, the ground beneath their feet trembling as though the tomb itself was coming alive, awakening. "Get out of there!" Rajiv screamed, pulling Nadia away from the altar. But it was too late. The shadows began to engulf the room, swirling around them with terrifying speed. Nadia looked up, her eyes wide with panic. The mask in her hand seemed to pulse with an eerie glow, and the darkness surrounding them grew more intense. The air was no longer breathable. thick with a feeling of ancient power. Suddenly, the shadows reached out, wrapping around them like chains, pulling them deeper into the tomb. "We need to leave now," Nadia shouted. But it was clear that something had changed. The tomb wasn't just a place of burial, it was a prison, a holding cell for something ancient. And now that it had been disturbed, it was angry. The team backed toward the door, but it slammed shut with a deafening crash. They were trapped. The glow from the mask intensified, and the shadowy tendrils started to climb the walls, wrapping themselves around the chamber like a living thing. There was no escaping it now. They had opened the tomb, and something old and terrible had been unleashed. The walls of the tomb trembled with a deafening roar, the shadows twisting around the room, growing thicker by the second. The ground beneath their feet seemed to shift, and the stone walls cracked open as though something was trying to break free. The air was thick with the unmistakable presence of ancient power, a force that had been sealed away for millennia, now violently awakened. Nadia, her heart racing, could barely breathe as the darkness grew around them. She clutched the golden mask tightly in her hand, feeling its pulsating energy coursing through her. It was as though the mask was alive, a conduit for whatever dark entity had been sealed in the tomb. "What have we done?" Rajiv gasped, his face pale, his voice trembling with terror. He backed up against the wall as the shadows closed in on them, pressing in, suffocating the space. Megan, barely able to hold herself together, screamed, "It's coming! It's coming for us!" The shadows weren't just black. They were alive, writhing and coiling, as if they had a will of their own. Nadia turned to the door, but it was no longer there. Where the entrance had been, there was only a solid wall of dark stone, seamlessly closed, as if the tomb itself had swallowed them whole. A deep rumble shook the very ground beneath them, followed by a low growl, emanating from deep within the tomb. It was a sound unlike any animal or human, a sound that was too ancient to comprehend, like the voice of something that had never been meant to exist in this world. And then, the source of the darkness revealed itself. From the deepest corner of the room, a figure emerged, a humanoid shadow, its form barely visible but radiating a malevolent aura. Its outline flickered and distorted, its features constantly shifting, making it impossible to grasp what it truly was. But there was no mistaking its intent. It was hunting them. Nadia could feel the weight of the creature's presence, the darkness that it emanated, pressing down on her, draining her will. The air grew colder, and she could feel a sensation of being pulled toward it, as though something inside her was being summoned by the creature's energy. She felt the mask in her hand grow hotter, the pulsating glow brighter, and suddenly a realization struck her. The mask wasn't just an artifact, it was the key to this tomb, to the darkness that had been sealed away, and it was calling them, summoning them. With one final burst of strength, Nadia lifted the mask and held it in front of her, trying to block the entity's approach. She could feel the energy from the mask coursing through her, but it was uncontrollable, wild. The shadows around them roared in response, swirling faster and faster, like a storm unleashed from the very depths of the earth. "We need to destroy it," Rajiv cried, his voice filled with desperation. "It's feeding off the mask. It's controlling us." Megan, still trembling, looked at Nadia. "What do we do, Nadia? How do we stop this?" Nadia's thoughts raced as the figure drew closer. She understood now. It wasn't just a tomb. This was a prison, and whatever they had opened had been kept sealed for a reason. The ancient civilization had locked it away because they knew the power within was too great to be contained. But the key, the mask, had unleashed it, and now it was too late. The creature lunged forward, its form twisting as it reached out for them. Nadia closed her eyes, knowing they were all about to be consumed by the darkness. There was no escaping it. But then, in the final moments, a blinding light erupted from the mask, forcing back the creature with a violent burst of energy. The tomb shook, the walls cracked again, and the shadows screamed in agony. The creature faltered, as if the mask was fighting against it, its energy forcing it back into the abyss. Nadia fell to her knees, breathless and weak. The mask in her hand had turned cold, the light fading as quickly as it had appeared. The tomb fell silent once more, the oppressive darkness lifting. The shadows began to recede, their tendrils vanishing into the stone walls, as if the tomb had swallowed them whole once again. The team stood in stunned silence, unsure of what had just happened. The mask, now lifeless and dull in Nadia's hand, seemed to have lost all its power. The tomb, once alive with dark energy, was now still, eerily quiet. But the sense of danger still lingered. Nadia felt her chest rise and fall with each ragged breath. They had survived, for now. But as they slowly made their way back toward the entrance of the tomb, Nadia couldn't shake the feeling that this was only a temporary reprieve. The entity they had uncovered was still out there, somewhere, and the cycle would continue. The tomb wasn't just a prison, it was a warning. They had opened it, and now they would have to live with the consequences.
Subscribe and press the bell icon so that you never miss the amazing video.